Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Martineau. I work for Stantec, and I'm here to talk about dRofus, the software. After this, please go and visit them. They're over in booth D44. Obviously, we only have about 15 minutes, so I can't cover everything that this program can do. So please feel free to stop me or visit the booth after. So just a little bit about what dRofus is. Basically, we have a lot of information on projects, and so I like to look at dRofus as a source of truth of information that you have on a product. So it's a web-based platform, so there is a client that you can install on your computer, or you can also get it via the web. What this means is that you can grant permission for people on your projects, and they can have permission to see something, or they can see everything. But the fact that you can access it through the web means that you don't have to be in the office or on your network to get access to the data for your project. So whether you're on a client meeting or at a project site, you have the ability to use this. It has integration with two of the bigger design authoring platforms. So you can see right here on the screen that there's actually a toolbar that gets installed. And then also you have the ability to link this database with your models. So in this case, we can set up bi-directional transfers of information. So whether that's stuff that you want to push from dRofus into your model or from your model back into dRofus, you have the ability to control which information is where and therefore able to get the best spot for your list. So you can actually see from these little arrows, sorry, it's a little bit hard to see, the directions of information. So for example, something like the area of a room, we're pushing that back into the database, where you're using dRofus to control certain things like the room name and the room number. So as I mentioned, you're going to have a lot of different people working on your project, and it's important that we have a source of truth where they can all get the various bits of information they have. So dRofus allows to connect the team through data, and this is also really important because whether we're in the design cycle, the construct cycle, or the life cycle, we want to have structured data that is consistently transferred. We don't want to have to be throwing out data and recreating it once we finish the design side and we go into construction. So what kinds of data can we get? We have stuff like cut sheets, so there's ways to integrate that we'll discuss. You have the specifications of your project, and also the program or the schedule of accommodations. And so hopefully your desk looks like this right now, but after you integrate the tool, maybe your desk will look like this. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about the roles that we have and what you can do. So anybody here is a planner? No? Okay. So once you're starting off and developing your program, I know a lot of the planners in our organization previously had an Excel spreadsheet with lots of macros and calculations in it that they used to do their programming. Well, this is the same thing, and now you can do that in dRofus. So what you're seeing here is just a high-level overview of a program and the various departments that are there. And you can start to do things where you set up that program. If you have 10 offices, you can copy an office. You can start to track the areas. You can then compare that against the actual areas that we get recorded from your models, and then you can start to see where there's a difference. So we do work on a lot of hospitals where there's a ratio of a percentage of how much you can be over the total net square footage. You can use dRofus to kind of control this. Here we see, depending on your type of project, the program allows you to be very flexible in how you set it up. So in the first column, we have a large project that has lots of departments and even some sub-departments. The second project, we actually had a hospital where before we developed the actual hospital, we worked on the master plan. So we used dRofus to kind of develop the standard room types for the master plan, and then we pumped that information into the actual hospital project. And then the third one is just an example of a program where we had one client, but they had two separate hospitals, but we managed both in dRofus. So also the other thing that we can do is use the data in dRofus, and again, as I mentioned, you can push that into Revit to create things such as colored floor plans. So here, this is a simple one where we're just using information in dRofus and then the filters in Revit to do colored floor plans for departments. But you can think of other ways that you can use this. So for example, you might have rooms that have a daylight requirement. So simply as a yes in dRofus, we push that in, we can do a colored floor plan. Also, from an engineering perspective, we've had it where we have a room that has a lot of heavy equipment in it. So from a structural perspective, they need to reinforce the slab underneath that room. So instead of having to talk to our engineer and say, hey, you need to do this room and that room, we put it as a requirement in the room, we pushed it into dRofus, they set up a colored floor plan. If the room shows up red, they know they need to provide additional reinforcement in that room. From an architectural perspective, any architects in here? Yeah? Recovering architects don't count, but okay. So, control. So How many have you worked on a project, and especially where you have multiple regions working, maybe everybody's first language is not English, so you spell room or a certain thing a certain way, and somebody else spells it a certain way. So then when you're trying to change stuff, you have the same room, but it's actually spelled 3 different ways. And then sometimes somebody said RM dot or RM. So really when you're trying to filter and control information, it's really hard. So there's things in dRofus you can use to control that. And again, if we think of a single source, once we set these things in dRofus, we can control them from here, push that in, and have control over that. You can also start to set up different groups to control different variables that you might have on a project. So for example, here we have C sheets for certain rooms, so we're able to plug that in. How many of you here ever work on hospital projects or where you have to produce room data sheets? Yep, so you know what a nightmare that can be. So again, we have the ability to start to set up parameters for each of the different characteristics that you have. You can have tabs for your different disciplines. Even within a different discipline, there's something like the room character versus the equipment and so on. And then in terms of being able to share that information, we can either export it to Excel or we can actually produce PDFs of room data sheets. And then also, the other thing that we want to do is drive consistency. So you guys know nothing about this program, but if you just take a look at this, go back one slide, and this. Oops. What you can see here is that this room information is actually controlled by a template. So what that means is that if you have a repeat room, instead of having to enter the information in for every single room, you can control it by a template. And you can see it's quite clear here, people can understand when it's controlled by a template. So they understand the ramifications that if they change this, it's not just one room they're impacting several rooms. And then also you have the ability where you start off and everything fits in a template, it works really well, but you're going to start to get deviations. So there's ways that you can control that and deviate certain portions. So for example, you have a room that might be slightly bigger, but that's the only thing that's different. But all the finishes are going to be the same. So you're allowed to deviate things that would impact the size. So for example, maybe it's going to need a couple more light fixtures or a couple more chairs. But you can do that in a control process and then still have all the other characteristics that are the same controlled by the template. So again, the flexibility to work how you need to. If you're an engineer, so you have a lot of equipment. That equipment is going to need power, it might need gas or air, all these characteristics. We can have items and we can start to provide information about those items so that again, the engineers can come here, they can understand if something needs power, if it needs water, they can understand the weight from a structural perspective. And again, this is all customizable depending on the requirements for your project. We can even start to integrate, if you have a Revit family, images of the Revit family. So when somebody's looking at something, they can get a full picture of what it is and they don't have to open up Revit. They might not even have Revit installed, know how to use Revit. The same way that we did the characteristics for a room, we can do that on the MEP side as well. So all your design temperatures, everything. But the important thing is to remember that this is all customizable and flexible, and you even have options. So you'll see there's some things here where we can just enter information. We can have drop downs, and you can control those drop downs where it's either the 3 options that are in there, or there's those 3 options, but you can have the ability to add a 4th one if you want. So again, the flexibility to work how you want for your project. And then also, a lot of people still are Excel based and they do things in Excel. We have engineers that have some really great calculations and everything. So what we can do is we can set up the stuff in dRofus. And again, this is all about structured data. We can then export that out to Excel, have them fill out the information, and then we can import it back in. So if you're more comfortable using Excel to do things, you can use dRofus. You have the import to Excel features. And then from a client perspective, so I'm going to assume that unless we have any clients, all of us here in the AEC industry, we're trained to understand drawings, plans, sections. Our clients might not be able to. So there's also a simplified web browser. So this makes it really simple, because you don't have to get your client to install anything. As long as they have access to the internet, they can take a look at this, and then they can start to look at the project in 3D. So here, we're just showing, again, really easy, simple volume with some of the 3D information. We can then take that a step further, where again, your client might not have Revit, not know how to use Revit, but they can click on a room, get a 3D view. You can start to look at the equipment in there, and you can start to interrogate that equipment. And then also, we can provide an audit trail. So quite often, we have clients that want to know or they forget why they've changed something. Every change that you do in dRofus is logged. You'll know who did it. You'll know at what time it was done. You can even put notes as to why, and you can see what's changed. So we have quite a lot of projects that are just using the log as minutes for meetings. From a quality assurance perspective, what we'll see here is a room that we have in Revit. And so what we've done is that we've set up some requirements for the equipment for that room in dRofus, and then we can start to compare that to what's actually been placed in the room. So you'll see here in red, there's actually something that's been put in the room and it's not in the program. So now you as a person can determine whether actually the program is incorrect and we need to add this, or perhaps this was something that wasn't supposed to be in there and we need to remove it from the room. In addition, if you're working on a project where they have a lot of equipment, so for example, we have projects where there's 50 or 60 different types of casework, okay? And so if you have to tell somebody, I need you to put the casework in the room, how are we going to be sure which one they're going to put in? So you can see here, in this instance, this or these pieces of equipment haven't actually been placed. And there's a simple tool right here that says place. It will pick that piece of equipment and put it in the center of the room. So that person now doesn't have to go to the project browser and Revit and look through all the different pieces of equipment in there and make sure that they're placing the right one. Documents and linking. So again, I mentioned that we have a lot of teams that are global. And so they're working in multiple time zones, multiple offices. That means there's not one single server where we can put all information. So we can actually put information, we can use dRofus as a column data environment and start to upload stuff related to the project. So for example here, this was a change order. So this project was under construction and the change order impacted certain rooms. So we're actually able to upload that document and then we're able to tie the rooms that are impacted by this change order in dRofus. And you can do that same thing also if you have items. So I mentioned, for example, that maybe you had a piece of equipment in there and we're deciding to change the model number or something like that. So we can put the new cut sheets up there so you can associate information with items. But again, really making sure that everything is in one place. People can go to one source of truth and we don't have disparate sets of information everywhere. And so with that, on behalf of myself, dRofus and Stantec, as well as Al Green, that's it. Any questions? And again, if you can't ask me right now, booth D44, that's where they're at. We'll be happy to take your questions. So, any questions? No? All right, thank you very much.
dRofus is built for architects, builders, consultants, engineers, and owners. But above all, dRofus is built for you. Welcome to the future of planning and data management for the global building industry. Welcome to dRofus.